here to testify in favor of House Bill 1216. Hello.
Hi, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee, thank you very much. My name is Bill Robie. I'm Senior Director of State Government Relations for the National Bleeding Disorders Foundation, and I'm here to testify in support of Representative Carl's 1216. I know we're short on time. I have submitted a written statement for the record that I hope you'll have an opportunity to review. I'm just going to use my comments here to address arguments that our opponents used. I've watched the video and read the testimony from 2023 before this committee, so I want to address a couple of the more pernicious arguments that are out there, and then I'll leave it at that. The most popular one is that, quote, copay assistance incentivizes patients to use expensive brand name drugs when lower cost generics are available. That's simply not true, just by the mechanism of how the drug is prescribed, dispensed, and paid for. Copay assistance has no impact on the drug that is dispensed to the patient. The determination of the most appropriate drug for a patient is made by the patient and their physician, and it's based on efficacy. For people with bleeding disorders who I represent, and we have a number of therapies available, more than most rare diseases, our patients are choosing the medicine that controls their bleeding. That's what they want to do. I've never heard a patient say, I want this one over this one because it's more expensive. The prescribed drug by the doctor then goes through the scrutiny of utilization management by the insurance company, or the PBM. The drug that the patient ultimately pays for at the counter, to simplify things, with or without copay assistance, is one that everyone involved in the process has already determined is the most appropriate for the patient and covered by the insurance, which addresses an issue that is in PCMA's written testimony today, that copay assistance somehow circumvents formularies. Everyone has said this is the right drug for the patient. It shouldn't change because somebody uses a credit card versus a copay assistance card at the counter. And if I can scroll down here, I want to touch on one other argument. Copay coupons incentivize increased utilization. This is from testimony from 2023. Copay coupons incentivize increased utilization, which ultimately may be passed on to health plans and members in the forms of increased premiums. In terms of increased utilization, I certainly hope so, because we should all want increased utilization of drugs by people who have rare chronic diseases. Because if they're not using their medication, their medical costs are going to go up like this. Using the drugs for people with bleeding disorders, it controls their bleeding. If they're not getting their medication at the pharmacy counter, they're going to get it in the emergency room, because our patients cannot go without their medication. It's life-saving, literally, for them. And I'm going to quote here, and I have a citation for this that I can share with you later, but research has shown that copay assistance increases medication adherence. Furthermore, studies have found that morbidity and mortality associated with poor medication adherence cost the U.S. and healthcare costs $528 billion annually. And then it goes on to describe what non-adherence means. But in other words, if patients can't get their medication, particularly our patients, their healthcare costs are going to increase for everybody. As Emily pointed out, and I deal with this issue in like 20 other states, if our patients get their medication, they can live a normal, productive life, go to school, run a business, pay taxes, do those sorts of things. If they can't get their medication, everything starts spiraling in a negative way pretty quickly, and they'll end up on Medicaid if they can't work. So I think we want our patients to make sure they're on commercial insurance, are able to work, pay taxes, and be productive. Thank you very much for your time today.
Thank you, Mr. Robie. Representative Casper.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Robie, I'm in the insurance business and have worked in the group health business for many years, and am very familiar with the PBMs. My question, have you ever thought about why, because it's the PBMs who are controlling this, it's not the health plan, it's the PBMs. Have you ever thought what incentive a PBM would have to disallow these coupons? If the money is paid anyway, why do they work so hard to not allow coupons? Have you Do you have any insight in that?
Well, as I don't remember if it was Lucy or even Representative Carl, they get to collect 2 deductibles, 2 max out-of-pockets. They'll accept they'll accept the payment, but then they're not counting it. One of the other arguments that's brought up is Medicare does not allow copay assistance. That's not exactly true. Medicare does allow copayment assistance. It's by a nonprofit or a foundation. They do not allow manufacturer assistance because of federal anti-kickback laws. But also Medicare isn't banning the use of the copay assistance and then taking the money anyway, as you described, which is what the PBM is doing. We don't want you using those cards. They drive up costs, but we're going to take the money anyway from the patient. So, but that would be a good question for PCMA, if there's anybody here.
If they're here, I might ask.
Representative Robie.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Robie, kind of looking at the overall big picture from the pharmaceuticals point of view. Yeah, and I've always been sympathetic to the fact that they research drugs. They develop them, they research them. Sometimes it doesn't work out. All that's out. They have to make it up somewhere else. But rather than reducing their cost of their drug overall, they keep the price where they want. They do this discount, and then they can keep their price up so they can keep billing the insurance on that level. I mean, it's definitely to their benefit, and that was kind of what a lot of last session kind of boiled down to, is not so much. I don't mind helping people. I understand that's a lot of money, and I'm very sympathetic with that. But it could be handled a different way if they wanted to. Would you agree with that?
Well, as to the pricing of drugs, I'm hardly an expert, and I do know the whole drug supply chain and everything is very complicated, probably needlessly complicated, and yes, there are a lot of drugs that are expensive. Again, for bleeding disorders, there are no cheaper alternatives. And let's just say you're $60,000 a month, which is, if I had hemophilia about my body size, it'd be about $60,000 a month if I had severe hemophilia. What are they going to cut it to that's going to make a difference to me that I can pay for? They're not going to cut it to $100. So if they cut it in half, I would still need some form of assistance. If they cut it in half again, I would still. So I'm not sure how you get to there are some drugs that are simply expensive. We have 3 gene therapy products on the market. 2 for hemophilia B, 1 for hemophilia A. They're $3.5 million. In theory, a one-time treatment that would cover you the rest of your life. That's the theory. That's expensive. I've actually listened to a presentation on how they came up with that price, which is not just arbitrary, and it's kind of crazy and complicated and factors in all kinds of things. I certainly would not defend high drug prices. That's not my job, because my patients, they use expensive medication, and I wish they didn't have to.
Mr. Chairman.
Continue.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I get it. Yeah, it would be tough to cut that down. The other side of that is that $5,000, let's say it's a $5,000 deductible, that's what they have on their plan anyway per year. So no matter what, even if they didn't have this disorder, they would be paying out of pocket for $5,000. So this isn't increasing the out of pocket for the insured. That's their plan. So if somebody helped them with that initial one, they didn't have to come up with it in January. Then they had to come up with it in February. But as far as the whole year, that's all they had to come up with anyway.
Well, you make a good point. For me or my family, we might not hit our deductible till September, October. For our patients, as Emily pointed out, they're hitting it January. It's that large amount of money. Very few people, we have a study that shows kind of what people could afford to get at any one time. Not many people have that kind of money, particularly the month after Christmas. So they'll simply go without it if they had to pay it themselves, and then they'll have a bleed and they're in the emergency room. So part of it is simply, it's not that you're dragging out the deductible like now. If people on Medicare now, they're spreading out that maximum amount of cost to $2,000 over a year. I mean, they don't get to spread it out. It's all due at once. And if you happen to be on a really high deductible health plan where your deductible as an individual could be $9,200, no one's going to have that kind of money in January. I mean, particularly a lot of our patients who are pretty serious, they don't have really high-paying jobs, things like that. But it's spreading it out is manageable, certainly for my family. But getting it hit all at once in January every year, year after year, is a tough one, and that's why we have the non-adherence problems.
Thank you, Mr. Roby.
You're welcome.
Did anyone else drive here today to testify in support? We would take one more.